So why did you choose communications as your major?
Good question. When I got down to Howard, I had a couple of choices. Thought about teaching. Obviously, my mother had already dreamt and placed it in my mind that I would go to law school, and I always loved to write. Back home as a kid, I was a member of an organization called the Fox Hunters. They made me the spokesman, probably because I talked so doggone much. They could never shut me up. So it seemed obviously a natural matriculation to one, writing, to not being afraid of public speaking, etc. And once I was able to visit the communications department, it was the dean at that time was Tony Brown from Tony Brown's Journal. Somebody I was always impressed with his style, his class. We didn't always agree on politics or whatever, but to know that there was someone of that stature at the School of Communications, I was drawn in. He was replaced by Lionel Barrow, who was also a well-known journalist, and one of the professors was Sam Yet. So I was immediately attracted to Howard and the School of Communications because they were loaded with top-notch journalists, and I wanted to be somebody who could write the story, tell the story. And I've always been that kind of guy who wanted to tell a story. So it seemed just like a natural matriculation for me to go and start with the School of Communications. And frankly, I'm glad I did. And shout outs to Lionel Barrow and Dean Smalls and all those people who pushed me through.
So why did you choose communications as your major?
Ooh, I thought for the longest I was going to be a lawyer. I was like, I'm going to be like my dad. I'm going to be an attorney. And I remember when I was thinking about majors, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to major in. I just remember him saying, like, if you're going to go to law school, you're going to get enough law in law school. So there's no need to major in criminal justice or pre-law or anything relative to that. Major in something that you're good at. And I had always been good at writing. So it was kind of like an easier thing to identify that communications would be that thing. I didn't necessarily know how it is that I would actually implement the writing, because I could have majored in English. I could have majored in, something else that was heavy in that. But I think for me, I was always a social person. So I was like, let me just try the communications thing because it gives you a more well-rounded field, because you can get the TV aspect, you can get the radio aspect, you can get film, in certain departments. And so for me, I think I was more so looking for that because I wasn't quite sure exactly what I wanted to do. Like I said, I thought I wanted to be an attorney. And then at the same time, when I got to undergrad, I was still thinking about, like, what am I even interested in really, to turn this particular degree into a career. And so majoring in communications was really my litmus test for college. Ultimately, it was really like, okay, I'm going to test this thing on out and see if it works for me. And it actually ended up working for me, especially because my dad's youngest brother, my Uncle O, was teaching our sports broadcasting class. And his class was very pivotal in my entirety of my career. So having, people like him that, even though I was his niece, that is not an easy grade. Like, he was going to push you. He was going to tell you, what to do. He was going to tell you if you were slacking. He was going to tell you, if you shine in what areas, and really just, groom you in that way. And I had other professors like Ava Perrine, who she was the radio girl, and she really taught us how to really hone that craft of like speaking and interviewing skills. So I was definitely glad that I majored in communications because it wasn't just about writing. It was really a well-rounded experience of production and behind the scenes work, sound, engineering, and all the things. So that's why I majored in comms. Didn't become a lawyer, but internationally known on the microphone. And we're back, 1219 podcast, 2 generations, 1 conversation. I'm one half of the podcast. Y'all know me as Imani B, out on these internet streets. And I'm here with my dad as he just called himself a Robin. So apparently in this all black, I am the Batman, a Batwoman, and my dad, Muhammad.
Welcome. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I didn't say Robin. I actually said Scottie Pippen to your Michael Jordan. And funny,
MJ.
I was gonna say Kobe, but I was like, no, Kobe was better than Shaq. So I can't do that. I don't want to usurp any authority because I don't hate to have you put me on punishment. Anyway, I'm Muhammad, the You can find me at Raw Law on Facebook, the Raw Law Project, every Thursday from 8 to 10 at hsrn.com. And looking forward to another episode since my daughter has roped me into all this controversy that I now have that I didn't have 10 days ago.
I am not controversial. I don't know what you're talking about.
You want me to tell you? How about I
Oh,
start?
go ahead.
All right.
Go
And
ahead.
I'm glad, people are going to think that we coordinate because we both have on Sport and Black today. So it is not like that. We don't sit around. We come into the studio and say, what do you want to talk about? Because that's the way, that was the premise behind us getting together. It was like, let's just have the conversation that we have on a regular basis or we used to have when you were kids. So that way it could be organic. It could flow the right way.
Yeah.
But now I'm doing my own thing. I don't get this kind of feedback. Now I'm doing your thing, and I got people calling me a racist.
What?
I got people wanting to fact check me. And again, you're talking about a 45-minute worth of discussion. So trying to add citations and things like that for people, as opposed to just saying, just go ahead out and research it. If you think I'm
Yeah.
telling you something that's not correct, go out and research it. Go out and research Zora Neale Hurston and find out what she had to say about Brown versus Board and Charles Hamilton Houston, and find out what the real strategy was behind it. So
Welcome to the internet, Dad.
yeah, look at him. You know what I'm saying. and it's interesting that this whole internet thing, honestly, for my generation, I'm telling you, there's a lot of us who really just like, look, I still remember having a beeper and thinking that was the hottest thing in the world, so it's a learning experience. So I'm glad you invited me to it, and that to me, it opens up some conversations, but it opens up a chance for me to look back and see the growth of the culture, the growth of the family, growth of you, and again, give me a chance to reflect on. I wonder if I did something right. It's my dad used to say that to me. Boy, hopefully you'll be the one who will be able to tell me I did something right. So, but that's how it is. I'll give you the latest one. All right, somebody accused me of being a racist. Somebody accused me of being un-American, and so I thought, well, look, maybe we need to discuss the concept of what it is to be patriotic, what it is to be American, and especially with your generation, because
Yeah.
I'm sure they don't see patriotism the way I see patriotism, and hopefully the way my generation sees patriotism. What do you think about the concept of patriotism?
I definitely don't see patriotism the way I think a lot of people see it. I don't think you raise us to be so American. We weren't the quintessential American family. You weren't really focused on us being so indoctrinated into Americanness, right? We were taught that to be American, that is imperialism, that's colonization, that's genocide, that is racism. And so to be indoctrinated into American fabric means that these are the things that you actually stand for, right? And then you also have that subset of what it means to be Black and American. And so I think I've been much more prideful in being Black American, right? The nationality very much secondary, probably even tertiary, just as a signifier and identifier to where it is that I'm from. I am from the United States of America. But that whole idea that standing for the flag and putting my hand on my heart or, belting out the Star Spangled Banner, I ain't never been on that. And I think that was more so because also what we had in our household was a greater sense of our own identity as individuals outside of the collective of this particular land mass and the people who, took it over. And so I think I would say I'm more of a segregationist when it comes to patriotism to the United States of America. I am proud, as we have spoken about lineage and what it is that it means to have, overcome the things that, having grandparents that have gone through Jim Crow and having you going through civil rights, those eras and those things, and you all pushing forward and moving the needle forward for us to be here and have the things that we have to actually go through the process of fighting for an education where that's something I didn't necessarily have to fight for. Me applying to college, me going to high school, that wasn't something that was a fight. It was just something that I expected, right? Something that potentially my son will expect, is that he's just going to go because that's what he wants to do. So I do pay homage to our foremothers and forefathers, our parents and people that have put it on the line for us in this nation. But I don't necessarily like wave that red, white, and blue flag as something that is an identifier to say that I am so American and I am so proud of that, because I'm not very proud of what this nation really stands for from its inception.
Intriguing. It's intriguing because we're shooting this on Dr. King's birthday, and as growing up, obviously, you know, the dichotomy and the generation that I'm in and from is Malcolm and Martin, you know, and it's been treated and continues to be treated as that they were polar opposites. When in fact, if you use the word patriotism, the people who were committed to America and seeing America do right, as King would say, be true to what you say on paper, they may have been more patriotic even by European definitions. What the European culture has done with patriotism, it says America, love it or leave it. That's their definition of patriotism. And I've never been that, and I've never encouraged you guys to be that. In fact, if you love it, if you know your parents are here, you know your forefathers are here, you know that your people helped build this particular country, the patriotic thing is to make it stand for what it says that it stands for.
That's right.
You know, and so that's why, I mean, here on the celebration of Dr. King, no one stood 10 toes down harder than him on be true to what you say on paper. I mean, 1967, the speech declaring that America was the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet is one of the most powerful statements ever made by an American here. Malcolm's statement, it's either freedom for everyone or freedom for no one, the ballot or the bullet.
Yeah.
I mean, these are powerful statements that say, hey, look, if I'm going to be here, I'm going to be here trying to set it right, to make it right. And I wonder, considering the person that I was talking to who said I was unpatriotic, I was trying to get the point across that maybe seeing the necessity for change in America, maybe the continuation of that struggle is more patriotic than just saying America, love it or leave it.
Right.
America, everything is American acceptable because it's America. And I think that, frankly, that comes from a white supremacist narrative.
Absolutely.
As to how they see the world, you know, and to me, that's I hope that out of the five of you, all of you got that as it relates to, if you're going to be here in America, then you have to stand 10 toes down, stand hard, stand firm, that this, if you promise this, or if it doesn't exist, then you have to make it exist. You have to bring about the change in America that Dr. King called for. I mean, he said that America needed a radical revolution of values. So then, therefore, what he was suggesting is that the value system in America was not compatible to justice, to peace, to equality, etc. So there had to be a group of people who rise up and say, we're going to change the value system in America. And to me, that's a demonstration of the patriotism that people really have.
And I think it's interesting because, like you said, you know, we're in DC, you know, and we are in celebration of, so his birthday, he would have been 97 years old, right? And I saw somebody comment on somebody's post on TikTok, and they said, I'm more Malcolm Black than MLK Black. And I responded and I said, well, if you are an actual Black person, then you would know that that Black man did not take a bullet to the chest by being just some passive preacher, right? This idea that, you know, Martin wasn't as radical as he actually, you know, shifted his politics to be. You mentioned in the dream speech, because everybody only mentions the dream part. People don't mention that part.
Right.
Where he's talking about this this revolution, in a sense, where he talks about the fact that and I'm going to paraphrase it because obviously we say fact check these things, but I'm paraphrasing it to say he ultimately was saying to America, you wrote us a check that your ass can't cash. You wrote us a check mark insufficient funds, and we're coming to collect. Now, obviously, that's not verbatim, but ultimately, that's what he was saying in a sense. And I feel that we identify patriotism as just looking one way. It has to look like military service. It has to look like, the person that has the flag waving outside of their home. It has to look like those kind of things. And for me, like I said, as a Black person in America, I see that very differently. I see it as you have to stand 10 toes down by your people. But in addition to that, you have to stand firmly against the things that have made this land the United States of America. You have to stand against genocide. You have to stand against the oppression of any marginalized group and identity. You have to stand firm in protecting each other and protecting the so-called rights that our foremothers and forefathers literally threw down for, literally fought for, literally organized and mobilized around to ensure we had the basic things like being able to educate ourselves. So that's why I told you, I'm like, welcome to the internet, because unfortunately you will find people, and I just had this conversation where people were talking about what was happening in Minneapolis, and everybody's calling these ICE agents Nazis. And I'm like, y'all went all the way outside to Nazi Germany when the blueprint of Nazi Germany is right here within the walls of the United States of America. And so when we talk about patriotism, I'm like, a lot of that blind patriotism comes from people not even educating themselves or being educated on the actual history of this nation. Because if you can go to Anne Frank and bypass the fact that we have safe houses during the Underground Railroad that went as far south as Mexico, as far north as Canada, it completely negates a whole concept that the people that you are looking to demonize are outside of you, but they're not.
Right. That's heavy. That's really heavy. And again, I mean, generationally, right? We came up, civil rights movement, etc. But we came up Vietnam War. You know, there was a draft.
Oh,
You know?
Shout out to my little sister Sadia. I got to shout her out for this one, because Sadia pointed out that you literally missed the draft by your birthday. So I ain't gonna put all your information out there, but everybody know 1219. We'll leave it there. But Sadia said the day before your birthday and the day after your birthday were drafted.
We're called into service. That's right.
You would have been how old?
Those are the times when you know that there really is a God, really is a God, and He got power over all things.
Somebody's praying for you.
That's a fact. I tell you, there was a friend I had back then named Greg Lawrence, right? Greg was November 24th was his birthday. And the same thing happened to him, I think. We both missed the draft call day before mine, and I'm sitting there waiting. Boom, it says the 18th. Boom, they skipped right over the 19th to the 20th. And I think the same thing happened to him, but we were really waiting to be called.
So,
go ahead.
No, break this down, because I don't think our generation, and I can even speak for myself, have ever heard what a draft actually looks like. Like you say, you were waiting for the call. Like when you all were being drafted, what was that like? What did that actually look like?
Okay, so what happens is they gave you like a registration card. I mean, they still send it out to you now once you turn 18. But the point is, you fill out all your information, etc. They put you in like a lottery, all right? And they say, you know, it's like mandatory service. Once you get that call, you have to go. You may recall that people like Elijah Muhammad went to jail. Muhammad Ali, probably the most famous, refused to get, but he had to go when he got called. So he had to go there to the induction service and say, I'm not going. I'm not participating in the draft. Well, that's what it was. It was a draft. They send you a notice, report to so-and-so and so at XYZ time and date, and be ready. And there were different classifications. I was 1A. That meant you was like on the list. You was gone, whether you like it or not. You know, so 1A meant that was the top of the shelf. You were getting drafted, all right? So on my 18th birthday, that's, you know, fill out the draft card or whatever, the document, and you wait around to see if you're going to get called, whether you got a job or not. You could get excluded if you were in college, et cetera. So a lot of cats began to try to enroll in college. And frankly, I'll tell you the truth. I think a lot of that is what led to college basically was free back then. A lot of
Right.
colleges were free, and the tuitions were very low when you went to major colleges. But I think that's one of the things that led to the increase in tuition and fees and things like that,
Right.
because people were avoiding the draft by trying to sign up for college. Or
Wow.
if they got drafted, they'd run off to Canada.
Right,
or,
right.
Or they'd come up with something like President Trump did, like bone spurs in their knee. Or, I mean, I can't even tell you how many brothers went out and played basketball and my man Poochie used to say he pulled the groin in his back. You know, so yeah, that kind of stuff. That's how determined people were to avoid the draft. And those of us who couldn't avoid it, well, we wound up at Fort Dix or someplace like that. And it was serious. It was a serious time because Vietnam was no joke. It was absolutely no joke. I'll tell you a brief story. I had a friend named Freddie. I won't give you his last name. After the war was over, he had done 2 tours in Nam, and he had come back. And we got a job together. I was working at a place called Diamond Bolt Company in New Jersey. And he was working there. And we used to do laminating of bolts and stuff like that, but you had to drop it into a very hot solution in order to laminate it. And when you drop it in, sometimes if you dropped it in too fast, it would explode. You know, it's like extreme heat hitting
Right.
cold.
Right.
Boom, boom, like that.
Yeah.
Man, this cat would literally dive every time. Every time it happened, he would dive underneath a table or something like that and just stand there like frozen. And so one day I had to pull him to the side and ask him what was going on. He said, I was in the Nam, and these explosions, they just got to me. And he was, you know, he was a beautiful brother too. And it was like, he told me the stories about Nam, about what it was like, etc. And again, one of the reasons why the preliminary question was about communications. When I was at Howard, I had a professor named Wallace Terry. Wallace Terry was a journalist who had covered the Vietnam War, and he wrote a book called Bloods, which is where
Yes.
the word Crips and Bloods come
Yes.
from. Bloods. It was the blood. They adopted it, but they were supposed to be a social service organization at
Right,
the time.
right.
Because the Bloods were coming back. That is one blood. Black people has one blood. This is the way they treated
Wow.
each other in Nam. They eventually morphed into the gangsters and everything when cocaine and all that was sold to them as being a commodity that they could use to come up in the world, which was, again, a fake out that they fell for. But in any event, he wrote this book about it, and he talked about patriotism. He talked about the love for the country. He talked about all these things coming from the perspective of black soldiers. And then they began to realize, because the people who they were allegedly fighting against were saying to them across borders and gunshots, why are you over here? Why are you over here?
What are you doing here?
You got problems over there. We trying to get the same thing you trying to get in your own country. And the tide shifting from the time of the entry into the Vietnam War and the draft and all the things that are going on in this particular country, you begin to see the soldiers and everything begin to have a shift in what was truly patriotism.
Yeah.
What was it to stand up against the system as opposed to just accepting that America is right no matter
Yes.
what anybody has to say. And I'm not anti the people who believe that America is right and they consider that patriotism. But I remember I was at the Nets game. I was a Nets season ticket holder when Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf came
Yes.
in and refused to salute the flag there. And he just stood, etc. He did a peaceful thing like that. And it was blackballed from the NBA, considered to be unpatriotic.
Right.
You now have a generation with Colin Kaepernick.
Yep.
It's taking a knee, considered unpatriotic. But again, the question then becomes who gets to define what it is to be patriotic. So what I hopefully you guys picked up from the little bit of limited education that I was able to give you is don't let anybody define any terms for you. Define it on your own terms, and then stand on it so that people can see that there's another way of looking at this. And I think Dr. King is an excellent example of what it is to be a patriot, even though by the time he died, he was one of the most hated people in the world and treated as unpatriotic, even by his own constituents. You know, so
Yeah, it's interesting because I've often thought about this. We've had the conversation of like the areas in which we feel like maybe our ancestors and our foremothers and forefathers might have got some things wrong. And one of the things that I always sit with, and it's probably going to be controversial, but I think about the ways in which Black people wanted to prove themselves so much. And one of those ways was enlisting into the military. And while, obviously, whenever, and we were talking about this earlier with our engineer, whenever we take something over, it's just, we going to do it. We going to do it with some panache. We going to do it with some flair. We're going to do it to the best of we're going to be the best at it. We're going to be the best pilot. We're going to be the best, at it. Right. So it's like that duality of like, we're going to go out there, we're going to show out, but also we're going to go out there and we as an oppressed people are now going to be the oppressor on behalf of this bigger system and this bigger thing. And I'm like, part of me is like, no, don't jump on their front lines. Don't be so, so willing to be accepted by this structure of whiteness, Americanness, that we then lose so much because PTSD is real.
Yeah.
The trials that were exhibited on Black men in the military, those things are real. And while it is that people try to negate those parts of the history, and say, oh, this person just on crack or this person is just this, it's like, what drove these people to actually want to be so spaced out that they don't remember what it is that they actually witnessed and what it is that actually occurred and what it is that they can't even close their eyes and go to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are the things that I think to myself, like, I do have the pride in seeing, like, the pilots and seeing their uniforms. I was a chaperone for Nasir's class. We went to the National Museum of African American History and Culture in D.C. and to see just all the artifacts, the uniforms, and all of those things. I have a pride in that.
Yeah.
Although there's that duality of this insidious nature of what it is that our folks were tasked to do in the military against people that, like you said, are like, wait a minute, y'all, they don't even like y'all over there. Why y'all over here messing with us?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And with me having lived abroad and lived so many places, I met a lot of retirees. I met a lot of retirees from the military that said they refused to step back on this soil because of how it is that they were treated elsewhere versus how it is that they were treated in the United States. And to also hear those stories of men that were like, and women that were like, no, I decided I wasn't even going back there. I was going to make a life for myself somewhere where I was appreciated, where I was accepted, and where I actually got a chance to talk to the people and had to question, why am I out here doing this? Why am I out here doing something that has been done to me and my people? Right. And that's something that I ask myself every day as a person of privilege, because I feel like you have to. What are the ways in which I use my privileges that are good, and what are the ways that my privileges are hurting someone else?
Interesting. And that's, but you go back to the indoctrinated history of what it is to be Black in America. You can go as far back and you'll find that there's always been in America Black people trying to say we're just as good, if not better than anybody else. We're just as good. I mean, we grew up with, in most households, they grew up with, you have to be twice as good in order to be acceptable. It wasn't like that with my dad and my mom. It was like, you got to be 10 times as good, and I don't want you to feel like you have to be acceptable. I want you to be the best you can possibly be and be exceptional, right? But historically, Black people have always started out this as revolutionaries. The original slaves who come here were revolutionaries. They want to fight. They're not having it. They're not having slavery, etc. So this is why you have the whip. This is why you have the chains. You understand? This is why, by the way, you have the rapes. All right? Because the next generation of kids is growing up and becoming your first African Americans. You understand? So you're talking about, I think Dr. Joy DeGruy, who writes Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, gives a lecture, and she talks about how many mixed race kids were born in the first 2 or 3 generations. So you're talking about in the first 80 years, there's over 800,000 mixed race kids. But you can control that because daddy is a European, and so you trying to figure out, how do I connect with daddy, and am I the rebellious slave who wants the whole kunte kinte treatment? I'm not. I'm going to resist this. I'm going to fight you, etc. And if you look at the history, I believe it's the Herb Africa book, who talks about the number of slave rebellions, talking about more than 10 people involved, 250 from 1660 to 1850. So you're talking about over 250 slave rebellions. That's not including individuals striking out against their enslavement. So these are organized efforts to try to get this off. 1812, the British are fighting the colonies, and the British offer the slaves, you can be free if you join us. This is where you get, and the rockets, red glare, bombs bursting in the air. Francis Scott Key writes that poem about slaves who just sacked Washington, D.C. and Maryland. All right? And that's why you have that third stanza that nobody ever reads, or ever tries to, explain. It's 1812. Jettison that up to now, you got your Frederick Douglasses, you got your Underground Railroad, etc. Again, people trying to get away from this oppressive system. But what happens is the South separates because of slavery. The North is saying, we don't really need this. There's economic, and South says, this is our economic boon.
Yeah.
We getting free labor, we making free money, we pimping these people, they belong to us. So they separate. Anything that says that you can go to Kansas and Nebraska and that's a free state and all that, no, we're not having that. So we're going to take our own country. The war, North is getting their butts kicked until Douglas, Henry Highland Garnett, Harriet Tubman convinced Lincoln, why don't you let the black people fight for their own freedom? From that point on, black people have always felt, who joined the military, that they could show that they belong by fighting for their freedom, because they literally turned the tide of the Civil War. And from that point on, people who joined the military are always looking, it's historic now, I'm not, I'm being generic, but it's historic for those of you in your audience who like to have fact checks. You can just look it up.
But don't look it up for themselves.
Absolutely. We're joined to be able to show we want to get down too.
Right.
We want to show that we are as American as anybody else. And it didn't matter if the showing that you were American and you didn't know the policy that was behind it.
Right.
You didn't know. We didn't know that this invasion and this thing about Korea was something that was totally fabricated to penetrate Indochina. We didn't know that the whole concept of sending black troops into World War II is because they were killing off so many white boys that they had to find a way to make sure they weren't killing off the entire white race, of white males. They brought the women into the thing, and they brought black people. Were like, well, what about us? Thinking if we go there and we fight, then it will demonstrate that we are good citizens, and the culture will treat us differently.
Yeah.
It never turned out that way,
Right.
because when they come back, they're treated as second-class citizens, etc. Isaac Woodard is probably one of the most profound stories. If you get a chance, look up the Isaac Woodard story. He's blinded in his uniform by some cats, and the white soldiers that allegedly fought with him or part of his troop watched it as it was being happened on a bus, like that. He literally blinded the brother. But that's story after story after story. Going out, join the military, to be patriotic, to show that you love America, that you're willing to stand with America, not knowing the backdrop of oil, not knowing the backdrop of drugs, not knowing the backdrop of regime change or the Monroe Doctrine or any of those things, but signing up to be able to say, look, we're just as patriotic as anybody else. And so therefore, growing up and understanding that left me, that when you guys were born, to be able to say, don't fall for their definition of this.
Yeah.
Don't be like it. And look, I got 3 uncles, military, 3 brothers, military, but I've never once criticized any of them, 4 brothers, military, of making the decision to do what they have to do to feed their families, to establish their careers, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But once that number came up and they said December 18th, And December 20th, shoot, my behind was like, good. I'm done with any commitment to any military or anything like that. I was done. I was like, good. Let me out of this joint.
Yeah.
I tell you, when YG went to was it the Air Force? I think YG went to the Army. Right? YG was a baller, basketball player. YG ain't never had an injury in his life. He was there 2 days, slipped on some soap in the bathtub. And his behind was back home right there with an honorable discharge. And he was the happiest cat in the world. Went over to Union College and scored 40 points in the game, broke the scoring record over there. So
love it. And may Allah be pleased with it.
I mean,
so you know, that's something that I think about nowadays, to where you know, I think about how it is that they enlist now, and how it is that they go to the hood and they go to these rural areas of white America, where in these podunk towns, you know, in white America, they don't know. They like, oh, I'm gonna be able to prove myself,
right,
and I'm gonna be able to be something in this, you know, in this small town where we all know each other, and some people are probably inbred, and you know, all this other kind of stuff. And then you have, you know, people in the hood. Well, you can get an opportunity to get a free education.
There you go.
You can get an opportunity to get, you know, some money. It's the same way that they're enticing people with ICE. We'll forgive your student loans. Oh. The government can forgive student loans now all of a sudden? Yeah, you just got to become a slave catcher. And you too.
There you go. Same indoctrination, year after year, generation after generation. And the point being, or the problem being, the liberation architects, that particular indoctrination hasn't been transferred generation to generation. Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, there is a book out, I forget the name of the book, but it discusses Dr. King and his confrontation with Andy Young. Now, Andy was one of his right-hand men. And Andy wants him to back off of criticizing the United States government, right? And he calls Andy, he says, you a capitalist. I'm a revolutionary. I want change. You want money. This is Andy Young, who becomes Jimmy Carter's secretary of whatever, etc. But it's a call out because it shows you the different understandings of what it is to be patriotic, what it is to love the country that you're in. I mean, believe me, I really do enjoy being here in America. I've been a few places around the world. I enjoy being here in America. I don't enjoy opening up the news and seeing a girl get shot in the face by a cop. I've tried that case before. So I know. I'm waiting to see the autopsy to see if there are three bullet holes in her face. 4
bullet holes. So they came out, I believe it was one to the head, and they said specifically, I don't think that was the kill shot.
No, I think the kill shot came from the side.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've tried that case before, you know, so I knew what to look for when I saw that hole in the window.
Yeah, of course.
You know, so it's like, okay, that I can't rock with that. I don't consider that you accept that's acceptable as being patriotic.
Yeah.
I don't accept that you changing the laws and not abiding by the law and making me abide by the law as being patriotic, that I have to go along with that. I don't accept that. I don't accept that you get to tell me what I can read, what I can put on my social media as being patriotic simply because it goes along with America. I don't believe that you can invade another country and when I come out to protest, you tell me I'm unpatriotic. I was there when the very first flag was burned in 71, and was it 68? I was around at least, and he showed it on the news, and it was like, oh my God, they actually burned a flag. Well, these cats was burning their draft cards and everything like that. They had draft card burning parties back then, you know. They were considered unpatriotic, but they may have been more patriotic because they were standing up for that First Amendment, that Third Amendment, that Fifth Amendment. They were standing up for these things. And some people just go along because it's the government that's doing it and say, because we've defined it as patriotic, to accept that it's America, and then therefore that makes you a patriot. And I don't think that's not the patriot that I want any of us to grow up being.
Which is interesting too, because when we look at how they set definitions, right? Dictator. We got to go get Maduro out of Venezuela because he's a dictator. Dictator is unilateral, making decisions, not asking Congress. Sounds very familiar to what it is that we're experiencing, right? You're doing things where it is that you get to define who are the bad guys. And I think it's so interesting how that propaganda, really feeds us into identifying that you're not American because you don't go along to get along, versus, like you said, the people who are saying, no. It doesn't make me less American. It probably makes me more American that I am questioning that the things that you all put on paper.
Right.
I didn't put that on paper.
Right.
I didn't put that all men were created equal and all that bullshit. I didn't put that people were entitled to free speech. I didn't put that people were entitled to religion. I didn't put that on paper.
Right.
Your forefathers put that on paper.
And you swear that you were going to uphold that.
And abide by that. So even when I see things like the military, which, we have family members in the military, but I don't know a whole host of like the inner workings of how the military works. But I asked people, I said, well, you all have a code. You all, I believe it's the UMCJ that outlines what's what when it comes to the military. And one of those things is that you have to follow lawful orders. And so I say, well, what do you do when there's an unlawful order?
Right.
When there's something that tells you to be deployed in a state against your own citizens,
Right.
where there's no actual threat. Isn't that an unlawful order?
There you go.
Right? And then, obviously you start getting into the politics of people explaining that, like, these higher ups are the good old boys club like everything else, right? They're not going to go against this, and they're not. Same thing with the police. They're not going to go against the shield. Same thing with the military. They're not going to go against the flag. Same thing with every single time there's an excuse as to why you don't go against the thing. And so for me, as I'm, out here even like expressing certain things, in social media, I don't mind people saying you're unpatriotic and all that. That might actually be a badge of honor. I might wear that with pride and a smile because really, ultimately, the insidious nature of what it is to experience Americanness. And I think also too, the propaganda we've been magazined to the rest of the world up until now.
Right. Facts.
We have been the Vogue of nations where people are like, oh God, I have to be there. Right. I have to get there. The American dream for a lot of folks, when I first moved abroad in 2015, and I remember people asking me in Egypt, like, why would you move here? Like, why would you leave America?
Right. Now, what's funny about that? Yesterday at the gym, I'm working out, and there's a brother from Cameroon who had petitioned the country maybe about 15 years ago before Clinton actually flips immigration. All right. It was Bill Clinton, by the way. It wasn't Donald Trump. It was Bill Clinton. But before that, and he was telling me he had gotten asylum back when he came into the country. And one of the things that he indicated to me was that before it was taking so long, he used to have to call home to get money. And the people were like, you in America? There's money on the streets. And he's like trying to explain to him, no, that's not how it is here. And he was serious. He's like, man, I if I had known, I don't know. He said, obviously I was in a bad situation. I sought asylum, but I'm doing okay now. But my gosh, it was like, I was like, I must have thought the same thing about America, that the streets were paved with gold. And he found out the hard way. Yeah. So it's interesting you said that.
As so many, and you see things now on social media where people are seeing George Floyd happen, where people are seeing our funding of Isn't Real and a genocide in Palestine. Now, this isn't something new. We're talking 1948. You know what I mean? We can take this back multiple generations, but now we can see it in real time, and we can actually hear firsthand from people who are still on the ground, and we can see what is actually happening with our own two eyes, right? And actually listen to the accounts from people who are experiencing this in real time, see what's happening in Sudan, see what's happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and actually have conversations of how do we play a role? Because one of the things that I recognize that the blind patriotism that folks have, it also limits their vision of seeing their impact, right? So whether you're a vote blue no matter who, or whether you're a diehard Republican, you're never challenging the people within those systems, right? We live in the United States of America. Why don't we have free health care?
Right.
I can go to Mexico and get my teeth fixed for 75% off the price of what it is that I'm quoted here in the States. I can go to a specialist somewhere else abroad, whereas here you're waiting 3, 4, 5 months, 2 years, 3 years, if you can.
Right.
Chemotherapy treatments are 5, 6 figures per treatment for people. And cancer diagnosis is up the wazoo in terms of people, being diagnosed just every single day.
Right.
And no one questions that.
Right.
In this nation, I can't just walk in the doctor and receive that. The conversation that people were having about SNAP back and forth, well, they buy chips. Do you not buy chips? Like, what the hell are we talking about here?
Right.
People just they just want to live off the government. Where is this government money coming from?
Right.
Let's start there.
Right.
Because if you're a taxpayer, that means the money that's from SNAP comes from your taxes. That's your money. That is actually mutual aid cycling itself around that should be supporting communities. But we live in a nation that, like you said, people think is paved in gold, but I've lived in what is considered the global South, where I did not see homelessness in the way that I do in the United States of America, where I did not see drug-induced people just slathered across the street, Fenty folding, and just absolutely out of their minds.
Right.
I went to Cuba, which is literally sanctioned by the United States. They can't get half of the things that they need. They still have free health care. I met a man who, he and his wife, both, they were trying to have a baby. They went and got in vitro treatments, which are thousands of dollars here. He was like, oh yeah, it was free for us. In Cuba.
Wow.
And so these are the things that I'm like, what does your patriotism get you when you're still struggling? Because none of us are in that 1%.
Right.
So somewhere along the way, we got this fallacy of middle class that, like, you're doing all right, your bills are paid, et cetera, et cetera. But we also forget that everything that impacts people the worst will eventually impact you.
That's a fact.
And that's where I feel like that's where my patriotism lies.
Right. And that's the concept of what's going on right now in the streets, is that what impacts other people eventually will impact you. We should be in the forefront of telling that story because it has always been like that. When white folks and black folks got together in Bacon's Rebellion, 1668, somewhere in that range, and sacked Jamestown, they were working together, indentures, slaves, together. So you had black indentures, white indentures, contract people, slaves, etc., working together. They sacked the entire town for their rights. They come immediately right out of that and say to white folks, you're free, you can keep your contract, but you'll have freedom when you stay. But you have to be able to suppress these cats, these black people. Don't ever unite with them again. And they go with it. And this is why you get your overseers and your all this kind of stuff, because they bit on that instead of the collective unity that would have taken the culture to another height. That's missing. But that's the indoctrination. And we have a tendency to indoctrinate here tribally. Everything America is right, no matter what America does. Look, like I told you, I had a professor, Sam Yet. Sam Yet wrote the book, The Choice, talking about how the invasion of Vietnam, the United States had no reason to get into Vietnam. That was a Viet Cong versus France thing. It was a French colony. U.S. got in because Vietnam was the leading rice producer in the world. And if you ever seen the movie Charlie Wilson's War, it's kind of like a satire on Alabama or wherever Charlie Wilson was from, wanting to take over the rice empire of the world, wanted to be the leading rice producer in the world, so they napalmed Vietnam. I mean, that's pretty much what Sam Yet says in his book, and he wrote his book in 71, 72. But we don't do that. We don't think along those lines when we start talking about, are we going to invade Libya? Are we going to bomb Iraq or anything like that? As patriots and as people who join in the military, or same thing with the police force, whether or not we're going to join the police force and do the job of policing, protecting, and serving, or are we going to join and be like those cats in Memphis, Tennessee? We see somebody we don't like, we get to beat them up because we have the authority to do it. That's a different mentality that has nothing to do with Patriotism, even though they wear the badge, they wear the symbol on here, everything like that, has nothing to do with it. And as you were talking about earlier, think back again to Dr. King. What does he say? He says basically that we spend more money on military hardware and all that kind of stuff, and it's every dime we spend there takes away from the social structure and the things that we could use to build in the community. But the patriotism isn't in building community. The patriotism is in allowing the military to be ready should something happen, and nothing has happened that we haven't initiated. And that is when I say we, that America hasn't initiated, including the potential for them to invade Greenland just like they invaded Venezuela and all that other stuff that's going on. That would be patriotic to be able to say, no, we need this money here to build cities so we don't have to worry about immigrants coming in and taking housings and all the other fake storylines that they give on other people invading their turf, when really what they really want to say is we want the country to be white, we want it to have white values, and therefore anybody who doesn't assimilate to whiteness and white values, then we want them out the country.
Yeah, similar to Tupac, we got money for wars but can't feed the poor.
There you go.
It's this, and we're seeing it now. We're seeing so many blue folks that are like signing over these things, giving billions of dollars to isn't real, giving, all of this money and aid and hello.
They got free health care.
They have free health care. They have subsidized housing. Their top college, because I looked, their top university over there in Tel Aviv, I believe, is about $3,000 US a year. Top university. These people are living this cushy life, but you keep saying that Palestine don't got nothing to do with you. The IDF, or IOF as folks call them, they are literally training our police departments. So when you're looking at these cop cities in Atlanta that folks have been protesting,
That's right.
but we have these black politicians that are voting yes for it so they can get their APAC money. It's like, pay attention. These things are so connected that's where I'm like, if you're a patriot, you should be if you have a job and you get money, you should know where them dollars is getting spent. To make sure that you have a pension when you retire, if you can retire, to make sure you have Social Security, and also to make sure you can feed, clothe, and house yourself, right? You know where those dollars are going. So why then do you not take that as seriously when those dollars are going elsewhere and you about to get evicted? Or somebody you know's about to get evicted. Or you see people out in the street who are poor. Or you see people who, literally don't have the basic necessities. And that not be patriotic. To be able to say, now I am going to turn my attention to holding you folks accountable to ensuring that if you say America first, then you goddamn mean it. And that means that the people who are the most marginalized, who need the most in this society, that you are standing up for those people. That is patriotism.
That's exactly that. And that would be the argument, because what you have then is a redefining, or at least a defining that defines out community work, helping, etc., as it relates to patriotism, all right? And that's why when you say blue, I mean, that's why you got both Democrats and Republicans will argue over the surface, but come together on the exact same solution. You know what I mean? And to me, that's why I always tell you guys, don't get into partisan politics, get into what's right and what's wrong. Stand for what's true no matter who it's for or who it's against. When you hear these guys talk, oh, Maduro is a dictator. They say that on the left, they say that on the right. The difference is, should he have invaded, as opposed he should have invaded. It got the same talking points, so it can only lead to the same conclusion. And that is that America was right. Somehow America was right. And if America is right and America doesn't follow any laws, and you have to support that, or you feel like you have to support that simply because it's America, I don't see you as patriotic. I don't even see you as frankly, sometimes I don't even see you as humane, and to me, that's the frightening part. But that's the part that where those of us, those of you, especially in your generation, of conscience have to be the ones who take the lead and be in the forefront of redefining these things, because that's when you say patriotic the way you're describing it, you're talking about what King talked about, a radical revolution of values, adding a value system that the culture just does not want to see, because it would take away from their ability to do America the way they've always done America, because doing America the way they have is to continue with the definitions that they have. And in those definitions, if you're black, you get back. You know what I mean? That's the old nursery rhyme that it was when I was a kid. If you're white, you're all right. If you yellow, it's mellow. If you're brown, stick around. But if you're black, get back. That's their definition of America, whether we like to hear it or not. I told you on social media, a guy called me a racist. And I was like, well, you just haven't read your own history. I mean, I'm not telling you anything that you shouldn't know.
Yeah.
And if you should know it, and by the way, the dude was black. By the way, if you should know, then you should know where it is that you participate to make it right, to keep it right. And they just don't get it. They want to be what America defines as American and what American defines as patriotic.
And let me also add, because I am sick of status quo and establishment blacks constantly calling black folks racist. We are talking about a group of folks globally who have killed, who have stripped folks of cultures, of spirituality, of their names, of their histories. You can go from Mexico, you can go to New Zealand, you can go to any area of the world and find a consistency of European destruction in its wake. For black folks in this country specifically, we were burned at the stake. That was something to watch. We were hung from trees. That was something to watch as a family. People who love your Cowboys, I believe Jerry Jones is in one of them pictures. Yeah. That was something for the family to sit and watch us roast over an open fire. That was something to marvel at. Like I said, went to the African American History Museum here in D.C., and I got a chance for the first time to actually stand in front of Emmett Till's casket. Emmett Till, if you don't know, Google him. Google his funeral photo. And the fact that his mother had an open casket because she said she wanted the world to see what they had done to her son. We were eaten. Our teeth were used as dentures, George Washington. Our skin were used for furniture. People still have our bones collected in universities, and we can talk about Henrietta Lacks and what they did to her cells, and we can go through the details of what it means to be racist. And you won't find black people at the top of that list. So I will end with that, because I am so sick and tired of the righteous anger that we have as black, quote unquote, black Americans in this country being flipped into we just don't like white folks. Like niggas don't have a reason.
I think that I don't think that I know very many people who care to like or not like white folks. And I don't think that's an issue when it comes down to what it is to be black in America. What most black people don't like is injustice. What most black people don't like is marginalization. What most black people don't like is being erased from a history of a country that they literally built, and it was built on their backs, their sweat, their lives, their death, their blood. Most black people don't like that. And so now when you hear people talk like you just got finished talking, the first narrative of those who want to maintain the status quo, their definition of what it is to be American, their definition of patriotism is to say that you represent something that's totally un-American, totally radical, so totally, what's the word that they use? Militant. They want to be able to define, name, and speak for you. If you anything from me in your life, don't ever let anybody define, name, or speak for you when you know you have the ability to speak for yourself. If that's all that matters, if that's all you walk away from this life with and from whatever experiences you have in this country, walk away with that you have the right to define and speak for yourself.
That part. And with that, We are coming into an end. Of course, Imani B. Y'all can find me everywhere on every platform at She Is Imani B. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all the things. Speaking truth to power. You might find me outside in the streets with a black power fist up. Where can they find you, Dad?
And I'm at Raw Law on Facebook, which is the only platform I know of. I know Imani got me on about 5 or 6 others. I don't even know how to work them.
He on Instagram too at Raw Law Book.
But I don't know. And you can catch me at Raw Law at hsrn.com every Thursday from 8 to 10. You can buy the book, Raw Law, An Urban Guide to Criminal Justice, and my other book, April 4th, Lessons on Living and Dying, which is a tribute to Malcolm X, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., and Martin Luther King Jr.
We out.